Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the 177 Nations of Tasmania podcast. So how much do you know about Ecuador? If you're like most Tasmanians, my guess is probably not that much. However, the Galapagos Islands, which belong to Ecuador, are probably more familiar. Now, my guest for this episode, Denisse, grew up in the largest city in Ecuador, but was working on the Galapagos Islands when the first wave of the COVID pandemic struck in 2020. She's lived in different parts of Australia for the best part of 15 years, but arrived in Tasmania only a year ago, and interestingly, has found some similarities with the Galapagos Islands. But what is an Ecuadorian doing in Tasmania? What do Tasmania and the Galapagos Islands actually have in common? For the answer to these questions and more, please listen on.
My name is Denisse. I am Ecuadorian, and I am a Ph.D. student here at the University of Tasmania. So I'm doing research on climate change and marine ecosystems in the Southern Ocean. So very different to what I used to be doing before I came here.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And how long have you been here?
A year, just over a year. I arrived December 2021, so not too long ago.
What were you doing before and where were you?
I was in the Galapagos working as a marine biologist. So I was focusing on shark conservation.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So it was very different. I went from the tropics to the poles.
Yeah, that's a big, both islands, I guess, but
yes.
The Galapagos Islands are very different in so many ways to Tasmania.
Yes. It's like there are a lot of similarities. Like they're both kind of like smaller places. People seem to all know each other somehow. Yeah. But yeah, I guess it's like, I don't know, they're both laid back. There are more similarities than differences, I would say. Probably the main difference is the language. Yeah, okay. Other than that, it's like pretty similar actually.
Before the pandemic started, I applied for a job in the Galapagos Islands.
Yeah.
It's like dream job. I didn't know it was possible to find a job in my field teaching English somewhere like Galapagos Islands. It was like, 2020, maybe this is my year. 2 weeks later, I didn't even get a response because the border closed.
Oh.
And it was obvious that all over the world things were going bad.
Yeah, things just shut down. It was like really strange because I was in the Galapagos when everything shut down. Yeah, all of a sudden I couldn't leave the island.
Wow. So we could have, if fate had been almost different, we could have met in the Galapagos Islands under different circumstances.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, isn't that funny?
Maybe it's an island thing. Everybody in an island knows each other then.
Yeah, because the reason why I mentioned that was because I did a whole lot of reading up about the Galapagos Islands, as you do when you may be going to a new place.
A new place, exactly.
And I didn't really have a conception. Of course, I knew about it's in documentaries, nature documentaries.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a conception of how many people were there or what people did for their daily lives.
Yeah, it's a bit boring, I would say.
Oh, really?
There's not many options. So it's a beautiful place to be in. But then it's like you tend to do a lot of the same things because it's not like here you have options of like, I can just go climbing or go and, kind of go in the snow in winter or whatever. Over there, it's like pretty much the same sort of weather. And mostly you just swim or do some sort of water sports. And yeah, I used to run a lot. I love running. But it was hard because it was like, you kind of run towards the volcano, essentially, because they're all volcanoes. So you just went up the volcano, essentially. Yeah. So it was hard.
Yeah.
Especially because it was so humid.
Yeah. And it's quite isolated. It's quite far from the mainland of Ecuador, isn't it?
Yes. It's 1,000 kilometers away. Yeah. So the flight is not too bad. It's only like an hour and a half or something, but it's actually hugely expensive to travel there. You have an idea, to get to Miami from Ecuador costs about half of what it will cost to go to the islands.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not a lot of people can, afford that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the people, the population sort of spread over a couple of different islands.
Yes. So there are 3 islands that are inhabited, and there's an airport in a 4th one, but there's no one really living in there. And I was living in probably one of the biggest settlements in there. And that's where the research station that I was working at is based as well. Yeah.
So tell me a bit about what kind of work you were doing there.
So it's just researching sharks. It was actually quite fun because we just put tags so we can see, like track their movements just to see where they were. So we can try to give this information to the managers, the Galapagos National Park, so they can decide, like, where are the best spots to make sure that, they are protected, and, if the marine reserve should be expanded, which happened recently, which is great news. Yeah, so I'm excited to see, like, what that's going to be like.
And so what brought you to Tasmania, actually?
So I was in Tasmania about 6-7 years ago, and I did an internship at the university, the same university that I'm in at the moment. And I quite like the university itself, the Hobart, everything about it was super nice. So I decided to come back. And because it does a lot of studies about climate change, and it was something that I wanted to know a little bit more about so I can apply it to the sharks eventually. Yeah, so that's why I came here, to get better trained so I can eventually kind of get back, hopefully, into conservation again in the Galapagos.
Well, when did you first come to Australia, and what were the circumstances?
I was, I think, 19 when I first came. And I was mentioning before that I used to watch a lot of Steve Irwin, the Crocodile Hunter, whatever. And yeah, I always wanted to come. And when I went to uni the first time, I was looking at going on exchange. And then I just asked my university, do you have any universities in Australia? I thought they would be saying, no, it's too far away, but they actually had 3 different agreements and no one ever went because it was too far. Okay. Yeah, so I was like, I want to go. So people thought I was a bit crazy at first, I think, because it was like, I knew no one in here, it was so far. Yeah, so I think, people were a bit concerned at first. Okay.
So were you also studying in the same field at that time?
No, it was completely different. I was doing hotel management because my family had hotels back home. So the idea was like, I will eventually take over the family business. But then I realized that's not my thing. Okay. And yeah, so I actually came on exchange for a year, really liked Australia, then went back for a year, and then I decided to come back. And then I finished my university studies here, working in hotels for a little bit, and decided to actually do science because that's kind of more the sort of thing that I like doing. And yeah, then I kind of stayed. I've been here for 15 years? I think, yeah.
Did you find a lot of differences between Australia and Ecuador at first?
Yes. But then it's I guess when you're in any relationship, you kind of idealize things and you're all the beautiful things about the country. And this, there's so many beautiful things about Australia, and that's why I'm still here 15 years later. But yeah, I think I concentrated more on the positive, and that's probably why I end up coming here and kind of settling here for most of the last 15 years. Yeah, but I think the thing that I like the most is less inequality, which is probably not as true as it was when I first arrived. And I don't know, I feel people are less judgmental in here because in Ecuador there's a lot of classism. Okay. So, you have to look a certain way, act a certain way to kind of belong to whatever group that you're in. And I think I always, everybody tells me that I like to do the opposite of what everybody else is doing. So I think that's probably why, I just didn't quite fit in. But in here, I was I just can do whatever I want and be whatever I want. So it's freeing in a way. I don't feel as such a weird little person anymore.
Were there any sort of major cultural differences that you've noticed between?
I guess one of these is what you mentioned before, families, they are not as I wouldn't say family oriented, but they are not as tight as they usually are in South America. But I guess it wasn't a huge struggle for me because again, I was not as close to my extended family as everybody else. And people mind their own business more here. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's that's another thing that a lot of people the judgmental bit. It almost always you hear someone complaining about what someone else is doing, and it's who cares? It's not affecting you in any way, so let them be.
And do you find there any differences between the people and sort of social behavior?
I think they're more open here in a way, but it's like open in up to a point. So it's like it's easy to talk to chat to people, but then it's kind of more difficult to make friends with people. So it's like they're friendly, but it's hard to make friends. In Ecuador, it's like sometimes I don't know, like they can be judgy sometimes, like I mentioned, but then it's really easy to make friends with people over there. They're like, they just see you in the street, and if they like you, they will be like, sure, let's go and have drinks, and and whatever. So it's like that's kind of like a big difference, I think.
So where did you grow up in Ecuador?
In the biggest city, actually, in the country called Guayaquil. So it's in the coast. It's actually kind of similar to Hobart because it has a river like in between it, but it's very hot and humid.
Yeah.
It's a nice city. I quite like it. But yeah, every time that I go back now, it's like, it's too warm for me.
Well, I believe Ecuador literally means equator, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's kind of where the name comes from that equatorial line that goes through the northern part of the country. Yeah.
So obviously most of the country is very tropical.
Yeah, it depends on where you are. So my mom's side of the family comes from like the highlands, and we have this sort of weather like nice and cool because it's like so high up. So, you can get to 2,000-3,000 meters altitude. So it's, even though it's a small country, it has like quite a variety of, habitats and like climates. So
what was it like growing up in Guayaquil? How was your sort of childhood and school years?
So I used to, when I was younger, until about 10 or 11, I used to live in the same building as my grandparents, one of my uncles. So it was always like people around. But then eventually we kind of moved towards the suburbs.
Okay.
And it kind of was like a shelter childhood, I would say. Yeah, so it was like a little bit different around there. So a lot of my friends make fun of me because they say I'm a bubble child because I spend a lot of times in the suburb and I don't really know the city that well.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But I think it's kind of funny because I think, I just kind of got used to. It's like more upscale sort of area. Although I always say to people, even though my family was like in the nice part, I was always in the poor part of the nicest suburb. Yeah, because it's like, kind of middle class family. So we just kind of moved in there before all the rich people kind of went there. Okay. So it was quite a nice area. And I think it was because my dad especially was worried about like safety because it's like, I guess it's like everywhere. You can, get robbed every now and then. I've never actually experienced that, luckily, but I think it's probably mostly because I spend a lot of time there in the suburbs. I never worry about, am I going to be robbed or anything. I would leave my bike unlocked like outside the shops, and it will be there by the time I went out. So it depends on where you are. And also, I think it's the problem is like really social and economic as well, because, it's not like we are poor countries. Most of us has a lot of resources. The problem is like we're so badly managed and people have no choice. Like it's either, I steal something to try to get something, some food on the table. So in a way, I can't blame them. Like, it mostly feels sad to me because it's like, it shouldn't be like that. We should do better. That's one of the things that I like about Australia. Although it's changing now, isn't it?
Yeah, generally Australia's had a reasonably good record, but as we have some particular problems in Tasmania at the moment, like the housing is a bit of a crisis at the moment, I guess.
Exactly. So it's like, it makes me sad because I've seen like, how bad it can get if you don't manage it well, if you don't have that safety net that, you have in Australia. Because I think, education, health should be, it's a basic human right. It should be accessible to everybody. It shouldn't be like only the people who have the money and can afford it should be able to access them. So that's kind of like one of the things that I really like about Australia, because it's like, it's like everybody will have like the same chance, which is not the same in my country, sadly.
at school, like, did you have any? Were you thinking at that time already about maybe going overseas?
Yeah, like every time, because I've been a nerd since as long as I can remember. And I used to watch all these kind of conservationists or like scientists that would go all over the planet kind of studying animals and whatever. And that was kind of my motivation. I actually wanted to be a vet, but I wanted to travel to like different places and come to Australia to see the koalas and the kangaroos and go to like Africa to see the big lions. But then eventually I kind of realized maybe vet is not the best thing for me because I really like dogs and I don't want, the sad parts. So that's why I wasn't sure what to do. And then I decided to do business because, it was something to do.
Yeah.
And eventually I decided, no, I'm going to back into science because I actually quite like animals, and the whole motivation for doing my work is because, I want to do something to protect them, hopefully. I don't think I noticed it until we actually went into lockdown, because I went to live with my mom for a little bit. And then it's like you start hearing the birds again.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God, like, when I was a child growing up, I used to listen to these birds all the time. And, all of a sudden they stop. And now they're kind of back again. So we don't have that very much. But then in other areas, like my grandparents, my mom's parents, they come from like a smaller town. And over there you see way more because it's like kind of a little bit isolated, little valley in the middle of nowhere. It's actually quite nice.
Yeah. And it sounded like you had quite a bit of extended family sort of around you.
Not so much. So often in Ecuador and Latin America in general, you do have like, your aunties and your grandma and whatever. So up to about 10, that was more true. But then when we moved away, it was like, I didn't really see them very often anymore. So yeah, it was a bit sad. And I guess it's like, I'm not as close to my cousins as other people might be, just because, kind of like, because we grew up a little bit more in a bubble, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of more what happens in Australia, where families are kind of quite far apart and not always as connected.
Yeah, and I guess it's like, I didn't get as homesick like a lot of people from Latin America when they come here the first few years. They feel like, oh, their family is so far away. They really struggle. But with me, it's like, I guess it's like not as difficult because, I can just chat to them on the phone and it will be fine.
Yeah. Well, that's handy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When you travel across South America and you want to speak to someone in Spanish and then you don't understand each other.
Yeah, I've heard there are some quite different accents between the...
It's not only the accent. It's like sometimes words have different meanings. So one of the things that I think it's hilarious, we have these... It's like a sort of like grain that in Ecuador we call them chocho. So we make a ceviche out of chochos. But then if you go to Spain and say chocho, it actually is a slang for a woman's vagina.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So if you say, oh, I like eating chochos, then people will be like, wait, what are you talking about?
Is there anything you found more difficult to adapt to, or anything took time to adapt to?
The food.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that even now I struggle with. I think in a way that's why I like Asian food so much, because in Ecuador it's like produce is like so fresh and has like so much flavor that it's just like, you eat a tomato raw and it's like nice and sweet. But in here it's like, it's almost like water. It doesn't have much flavor.
If you get them from the supermarket.
Yeah, so it's like, I think you have to like know where to get it to like have that same sort of flavor as in Ecuador. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things that I struggle with, because it's like, I'm not a great cook. Yeah, over there it's like, at least because the fruits and veggies are so nice that, your food was nice. But in here it was like more of a struggle. So I have to learn how to cook. But then I got into Asian food because it was like more flavorsome, I guess. So in a way. That was like a good thing.
Yeah.
Silver lining, I guess.
So what kind of foods are popular in Ecuador?
It kind of depends on where you come from. So right in the coast, there's a lot of like seafood. We have our version of ceviche. We have like everything that you can possibly imagine with like seafood and fish. In my hometown, actually all along the coast, rice is big. Almost like in a lot of Asian countries, you always have rice. It's the same in Ecuador. You always have rice. Even if you have pasta, you will have rice. That's how much we love it. But then if you go to the highlands, they tend to eat more, I think, a bit more healthy. They eat more grains. Oh, although they eat weird foods as well, so they have the guinea pigs that they eat.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw that on Wikipedia. I thought, it said one of the specialities of Ecuador was guinea pig, roast guinea pig or something.
Yeah, and then it's like, it's weird because you see the whole animal, so you see the face. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about looking at the face of the animal that I'm about to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but people love it. Like, I did try it, although I kind of felt sad, but I was like, I don't know, it tastes a bit weird. But yeah, people really like it. But it's very different depending on kind of where you go. But yeah, I think we use a lot of plantain, but which is like the one thing that any Ecuadorian from the coast will miss when they are away.
Okay.
Yeah, we eat a lot of plantain, a lot of dishes. You can have it like fried. You can have it mashed. You can do so many beautiful dishes. Just thinking about it, I'm like salivating. So yeah, that's one of the things that I really miss because here I can't find it anywhere. Essentially, they use religion as a weapon, like to for the Spanish to kind of like conquer us, I guess, in a way. Yeah, because that was the only way that they could really control people. Like, and it's really sad because even now, like everywhere, there's problems with racism, probably not as bad as in the US, for example, but it's still there. And there's still this belief that, people who are not white or white looking are less than people who are white. And that's all because when the Spanish went over, it was like, God meant for the white people to be the best thing ever, and then everybody else. And it's sad that it's still like that, like people internalize it. Yes, and it's like it's still a thing. So we have been making progress. We have indigenous people in parliament and whatever, but you can't say that there's no racism or that the effects of what they did are not felt still.
So what is the racial makeup in Ecuador? Is there still a lot of people who are of indigenous?
So I think it depends on the region. People in the coast, most of the coastal areas, we tend to be quite well mixed. Mm-hmm. People in the highlands, that's where most of the indigenous peoples come from, and also like the Amazonian part. But yeah, for example, myself, I have a bit of indigenous, a bit of black, and a bit of white in me. So it's like, from everywhere. Mixed together. Yes.
Because I think I did a bit of, I just looked on Wikipedia a bit about Ecuador, and it seemed like there were quite a high percentage of people who are sort of mixed race.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly what's the proportion, but yeah, it's quite high. But then if you look at our football team, you wouldn't think so because a lot of people are black. They come from like two main provinces. Yeah. Like there's this little tiny town in the middle of nowhere, a valley, and they're all essentially slaves who escaped. Yeah, and they went to this really remote area and they were free. And they're amazing footballers. That's why most of them come from there. Or there's another province at like the top, the northern part of the coast. Called Esmeraldas. Again, it's like a lot of like slaves who escape and they could become freed in there. And yeah, amazing footballers from there as well. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of plans for the future?
I don't know. So I like moving a lot. And part of me is like, okay, enough. I've been here like over a year. I should like move on to another place. But then it's like, I have to finish a Ph.D. I have 2 more years in here. So I don't know. Part of me kind of wants to stay, but another part of me wants to leave. So I don't know what I will do. I guess it's like more importantly, it's like, can I get a job?
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, it's like if I can get a job here, I won't complain. It's a really nice place. But then if I have to go away, I'll probably be a bit sad because it's like, it's such a nice, it's just a nice place to be in. Yeah.